What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to do my spoiler cast for Mafia, the Old Country. This is, I try to do this a little bit unorthodox versus maybe other ones that you see online. Sit back, relax. I'm just going to ramble. I'm just going to go through. I try to keep it linear, but I have a feeling I'm going to jump all over the place. I want to talk about the big moments in this game. I want to talk about that ending. I want to talk about what happens, with the story and characters. All things that I would say maybe 9 out of 10 of them I loved, and I think really helped the game, really helped the story, but you can't say it in a review, right? I mean, it's such a pivotal moment in the game. You can't say that in a full-on review. So I want to do it here. I want you guys to let me know in the comments. Tell me what you thought about the big moments. Let me know what you guys think about my thoughts, as I'm going to say for these big moments. Let me know in the comments, all right? So let's try to keep it generally linear, but I mean, the ending, it kind of stands out in my head, but we'll get there. All right, I want to talk about Luca first, just because this was something that, look, as you see, like, this opposing family start to grow and grow and grow, right? This is part of the game where I think you can kind of see it coming. This is the classic, like, you have a good thing with Jordan, but then all of a sudden now, like, you have to have conflict, right? There has to be a war, or there has to be somebody overstepping boundaries, and I love how they honestly, I mean, they tied it directly with Enzo the entire time. I mean, the end of the game is literally at the mines that started it all, right? In fact, let me just say this, too. Throughout the entire game, when they would skip those years and you would hear that explosion, I would think over and over again, is that a volcano? Is a volcano going to go off? And that's what that's what, like, the game is trying to tell us as we're jumping from 05, 06, 07. And wouldn't you know it? There you go. I actually called that one. And that was a clever one. That was a clever one that I thought I could be wrong there. But I was like, I wonder, because sometimes that volcano just wouldn't look right. I was like, I wonder if that volcano is going to go off. And every time they're jumping and you hear that, it's almost like it's haunting Enzo, even though it hasn't happened yet, right? So it's like, I really like that. But anyway, the game has a way of coming back to things, and they do that with that family, right? So Enzo's trapped in the mine with them and escapes, and then eventually that comes full circle where, and I thought they would do something with that, and they didn't, where it's like, it's more because of Enzo. Honestly, it was just that family getting greedy. They tell you the story of that family, that pretty much that's their MO. They came in, they kind of live by their own set of code, and they just overstep. They just really always try to take that next thing, even though they shouldn't. And so I'm a big fan of that. But specifically with Luca, I mean, I would say it really starts with, like, the baptism. Man, oh man, what a freaking mission all the way through. I mean, you have the Isabella stuff that I think is so beautiful. You have the scenery and the parade that I think is beautiful, and then you have that assassin, okay? And then you that entire, like, Uncharted, like, chase I thought was so freaking good. And the game's building it up where it's like, this Luca, you really like him. I really like him. Enzo really likes him, right? So something has to go wrong. And as you're building, you're thinking about how Enzo and Isabella, are going to make out as in, like, what's their end goal here and how are they going to do it? Luca would have been too helpful to them, right? So he had to go. So it's like, in that way, when he gets shot later on, where it's kind of a setup, right? And they do a couple different setups in the game. I mean, when he dies, that is such a freaking blow. And I felt it. I mean, Enzo felt it. The Don felt it. And let's go back to Enzo, though. He really, really felt it. And that's such a pivotal moment, even, too, after he does the deed, goes to the opera house, eliminates Sparado, everybody, right? And he comes back and he tells Luca, like, hey, thanks for everything. I'm so sorry. And I got to live for myself. I got to live with Isabella. I love that. Luca's such a pivotal character to him, even, in his dying wish, right? Literally as he's dying, saying, get out. If you can, get out. And I freaking, like, that almost haunts me, right? That probably haunts Enzo, where it's like, oh my dear God, again, he would have helped. He would have helped Enzo leave as opposed to Cesare, right? So it's like, okay, well, he can't stay around. The game has to kind of kill him there. And I love it. I mean, what they did with so many of these side characters, Valentina, like, all of them are so good. And just kind of build this kind of, like, background lore where it's like, this is what the family does to you. It does, I'll say this. This leads to one of the most back and forth things that the game does that I think is going to be the most divisive or divisive, however you say that word, with the fandom, okay? And this is how I felt. So the game goes, and you're getting used to it, and you're realizing, all right, like, eventually something's going to happen because of this Enzo Isabella thing. Now, for me, I was thinking, all right, every time Enzo does something good, now's your chance. You know what I mean? Just go to the Don and say, hey, I love your daughter. And the thing is, you probably wouldn't have been killed for that at that point, right? It wouldn't have. And because he's kind of in the midst of lying, but he's not like all the way there yet. Eventually, it kind of gets like you're in too deep, right? Like eventually, he's trying to set his daughter up with like two different people. First one falls through because of that whole like family war. And then second one, I think, was the Baron's son that was just going to marry, and then that would have connected the families or whatever. As soon as that happened, and I think Enzo was told that in a car ride, I was like, oh, it's over. It's over, because I thought we dropped that. I thought we dropped like the Don trying to get Isabella to marry a certain person. And it's like, oh, no, it's back on. And it's just to a different guy, but it's still connected to the same family. And it's like, oh dear, we're in so much trouble now. But okay, we're building. And again, in my opinion, or my mind as I'm playing, I'm thinking, just do it. Just rip the Band-Aid off and just tell somebody that you love this girl. And I love that relationship. I think they did such a good job. Now, here's the thing. Here's where the conflict comes, okay? Because at the end of the game, so much happens, specifically with Enzo, the Don, and Cesare. I would say those three, that really almost provided closure to how I feel about it. So I was starting to get upset. I was starting to think, all right, for the love of God, just tell them. Like, why are you're hiding, and now they're noticing that you're not around, and they're going to put it together, right? Like, somebody's going to figure it out. And eventually they do. But then they make the decision at the end of the game to start to come back to those themes of, like, who are you? You know, like, are you, like, you can't change. In fact, that's what the Don says to him, right? Like, you are who you are, and nothing can ever change you. And it's interesting because this was something I was thinking as the game was going on, is Enzo has proven to be such an amazing soldier. You know, much like all of it, Tommy, Vito, and Joe, like, all of these characters are so loyal, but they're also very effective, right? They're amazing shots. They do all the big heists, and they always get away, and they're always victorious. The thing is, those characters actually rise, I would say, more than Enzo does. Enzo gets very close to everybody, but he's not, I don't think he's rising as much as he should have. And that's another thing I was thinking throughout this game, where it's like, yeah, you're being trusted more and all this stuff, but why aren't you way more powerful in this hierarchy than you actually are, you know, in the game? And then towards the end, again, like, all of that closure where it's like the miner boy kind of mantra, that's what they still always thought of him, at least the Don, at least the higher-ups, right? Maybe not Cesare, and definitely not Luca, right? Like, definitely Luca for sure was like, hey, and Isabella would always say, like, you're the only one who treats me like a human, right? Like, that we can actually talk, versus, like, I'm like an entity of the Dons and all that stuff. So there were some, and I loved, honestly, that they did that. It's heartbreaking. It actually was heartbreaking, like, when you freaking stab the Don and, you know, he's telling you all these things, or you're in that fight, because it's like, you kind of realize, Enzo realizes because he's always been going back and forth, you know, and I like that too, because, you know, he grew up, he's talked about this, you know, throughout the game. He didn't have a family, and he doesn't really, whether he doesn't remember anything or he doesn't want to, he just doesn't care, right? Like, he was really never part of a family. So I can appreciate this pull, because throughout the game, right, he in the beginning, he's so, like, an outsider with the mindset of, like, well, Isabella, why can't you live your own life? Why does the Don pick a person for you? Like, it's so foreign to him, right? And he instills these characteristics into her that she then throws back at him as the game goes, because he's losing it, right? He has this feeling and this character to him that slowly gets zapped by being part of the family. Now, at the end of the game, he realizes it, right? Which I really, no matter what happens to him at the end, I really like that, like, okay, full circle, he understands, like, but I really can appreciate that build of, like, that was him, and then he transferred that stuff to Isabella, and then as the game went, he was becoming a bigger part of this family, and he felt that loyalty, and that's all he ever wanted. So he was almost hypnotized by it as the entire game went, and that got in the way of Isabella, because then Isabella would say, you know, the man that I fell in love with, or the guy who talked to me those first couple times, it would have been an easy decision the first time she asked him to run away with her with the baby, and he said no, right? He said, I have to, you know, handle the stuff that the Don just said. The Enzo of 2 years before then would have done it in a heartbeat. He lost that part of, like, his soul, right? I love that. I mean, that's such a, when I think about characters and how well they can be, because Enzo he's not the personality of Tommy. He's not the personality of Vito, or even Lincoln. You know, Lincoln's a character that loses himself too, and he kind of goes almost too much, especially based off which ending you pick in 3. Enzo is a little bit more subdued, right? He's not loud. He doesn't have as big of a personality, and he also doesn't kind of have a friend like Tommy had Sammy and all them, right? Like, he doesn't have that. Cesare becomes it. Leo becomes it a little bit, but they never fully get there. His main thing is Isabella, and his main thing, I would say, is his character, what he values in life, and his values change, as the game goes, but then he comes around, right? So again, getting back to that ending there, I really like that they did that they went like, hey, you actually were always kind of viewed like this. You probably would, like, they keep promising you, or they tell you at the end, oh, you could have had everything. You could have had everything. Really, though? Because he did so much for them, and they kind of proved that, like, on a dime, obviously they're willing because of their oaths and all that stuff, right? They're willing to do what they had to do, but they always really thought of him, right? Like, when they're insulting him after he's brought in and after they know what he was doing with Isabella, all he's hearing is that they never should have trusted you. They never really did trust you. They always kind of thought you were this kind of guy. And it's like, that's so mean. That's really just a mean thing. I like what they did with the Cesare, where it's like they were friends, they became friends, and maybe there's a little hope left in that guy, right? But ultimately, what happens. So let's talk about those really big moments. There's a couple of them right at the end. So you kill the Don. That's a huge one. And then Cesare kills you. And so I want to believe that Enzo survived that, but I feel like these games have always done this, where they can have these just very tragic endings, and they'll have like the glimmer of hope. I guess like one had say with Tommy, right? He did have a glimmer of hope. He got to live out way more of his life than he really should have based off what he did. And, eventually being killed by Vito down the line, but he got to live a good long life. Vito technically really got to live a long life, depending on what happens with him in Mafia 3. So, like the games have always kind of done this. I did expect it. I really did. As things were coming to a head, I don't know how many times he's going to be able to get out of these things. And I can appreciate him wiping out multiple families. A volcano helped him with the last one, but he took out some high-profile people, including the literal head. He beat everybody he really ever fought. Lost a couple times, but was saved, by others. But, he had a great fight in him, and then he was killed. And I do want to believe, that's kind of where the story ended, with him. It's tragic. It's very sad. Did he deserve better? Probably, but that's that gray area that I love with these games, where it's like technically these are all very bad people, right? Like whether they do have that heart to them, and whether they're married, whether the Isabella thing happens, like no matter all of that stuff, they still entered that life. And especially like, look, you can get out of it. I've watched mobsters like on YouTube that were in the Mafia 70s and 80s and got out, like a Michael Franzese, right? And I mean, you can have amazing redemption stories. Things like this though, things like this game, the amount of freaking bodies that you're laying down in these games, you really can't rebound all the way. So I can appreciate that the games do that. It's tragic, it's sad. I didn't want Enzo to die, but I think that was a good ending, and I like the way that he wiped the floor with pretty much everybody to get there. And then it's tragic because the Isabella thing, and I think the most where I kind of sat there just in plain silence of like Luca was huge. Like him getting shot and then him dying and him telling Enzo again, like, get out. I was like enthralled. My eyes were not blinking. Okay, but when Cesare arrives and he gives her the tickets, right? When she asks about Enzo, and then that's his response, and just for her to go and she's crying, that got me. That definitely, like, okay, that's the most emotional moment I think in the entire game. Beautiful. And honestly, did not expect to play as Isabella, but loved it. Thought it was really, really clever. You had to do some different stuff. She actually did take a couple people out, including Tino, which that was a very Last of Us 1 with David fight, was it not? Right? You're trying to go around cover, and this is an old man versus a girl that is not well trained, right? So you're just trying to get the jump on him and do a couple slashes and then back off. Very, including, by the way, the fact there was fire everywhere, which, if you remember, David in The Last of Us, there was also fire in that environment as well. So I couldn't help but see the Naughty Dog, references. But no, I mean, I thought she was great. I liked her character just overall, and I didn't mind that at all. In fact, I thought that was actually a good change of pace. It was a nice, again, you get that, like, the gray kind of ending where it is sad, it is tragic, tragic. She finds out about Enzo, all that stuff. But then you have to have a little positivity. This game has to have a little bit of light, and it does throughout the whole game, really. But then, at the end, she makes it, right? She goes to Empire Bay. She's going to have the kid, and that's really cool. And she gets the note from Enzo, right? So she kind of gets, like, his last words of how he feels. Man, a few words. I thought that note would actually have more in it, or more. Like, I will say, that didn't really get me all that much. Like, if that was the last note that somebody wrote for me, I would say, that was nice, but I don't know if I would, like, that didn't, I don't think they really, like, encapsulated, like, his entire character. I think he could have said it better than that. But no, I mean, I did like that ending, I will say. I felt, in the moment, you're kind of just staring, and you're kind of just in it. It went where you kind of expected it to go, but, I mean, like I said, I think that's kind of in line with, you don't always have to have, like, the protagonist die, but I think that's the interesting thing with all of these games is they actually have changed it. Like, each one, none of them are really, like, they all have it, right? So, like, number one, Tommy does the jail, gets out, you have this, he lives, and then you have, okay, then he's shot and killed, right? So you have that. In 2, you have the very bad ending of, okay, well, technically, like, Vito does it with Leo, actually, right? He solves the problem, he's driving away, but Joe was not part of the agreement. Now they bring Joe back in 3, which really hurts that ending of 2, but that ending of 2 has that good and has that bad, has that darkness and that light. 3, again, depends on really which ending you choose. I chose to walk away as Lincoln, which I feel like is where he's the most morally okay version of himself. So they all have something different, and actually, well, none of them actually die, except for, I guess, Tommy, but that's like decades later. Everybody else, I guess, Lincoln can die, but Enzo would actually be the first one canonically to be, like, killed. He's killed in the game, and then you still play after him. So I think that's all of the main points I want to make. You guys let me know what you think in the comments, or if there's anything I missed that you guys want my opinion on, just let me know. I'll try to respond to as many comments as I can, all right? Let me know what you think. Make sure you're subscribed, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.